Okay, here we go. We're going to start with a couple of exercises to demonstrate revolves. The previous one we're talking about extrudes, and so I'm going to use this object on the screen here to demonstrate a revolve. We have a half sphere with a external radius of 50 millimeters and then an internal radius, a little circular cavity of 20 millimeters. So we have that. I'm just going to go ahead and move that out the way. Okay, so now the big thing that we want to remember is that revolves are generally different, right? So generally, when we want to build something, we'll start with our general profile. I'm going to start here by creating a sketch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and pick my plane, and we can pick whatever we want to as reference here. I'll just go ahead and pick the XZ plane right here. But again, it really just matters on whatever you're comfortable with. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and pick a couple of different arcs. I'm going to start with a 3-point arc right now, generally because I like to kind of draw my geometry first and then set my relationships and then go ahead and put constraints there. So I have an a arc right there, which I'm doing, and I'm just going to highlight over these points. And when you see that square over this point, that means that it's going to constrain it to those points. So I'll click there, and then I'll go from that. Now, I'm still in my line tool, so I'm going to hit the escape key to get out of that. And then when we see that, we'll see that we can move this freely and all of this. So generally, I want my sketch to have a constraint with this point in this line here. So I'm gonna click this point, and I'm gonna hold the control key, and then I'm gonna go up here to constraints, and then I'm just going to go ahead and say coincident, and then that's gonna lock it there. Now I'll talk a little bit more about constraints in a later video, but for right now we'll just focus on establishing these relationships. And then you'll see my pointer's still black, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the escape key again to do that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is when I move all of this around, I'm going to go ahead and click this center point here to this center point here, and then I'm going to hit a constraint coincident to lock that in place. Okay, and then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to hit escape to move out of my constraint. You'll see how my cursor is black. I'll hit escape. Then I'll select this line, and then I'm going to go to a horizontal vertical constraint. All right, and then I'll hit escape again. Again, you want to remember when you're working in CAD tools, you're generally switching like the mode that you're in. And so the escape key is always a good friend to get you out of that. Escape to get out of this. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the create menu, and then I'm going to go to sketch dimension. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to select this edge. Now, one of the things to remember is that when you're working with circular features and profiles and sketches, unless you have a full circle, your dimension is going to default to the radius. So even though in my initial image it was 50, I want to say this to be 25 because it's going to give me the radius. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and finish my sketch. And then once I finish my sketch, you'll see that I have my sketch one, which I can control the visibility down here, and then you'll also see it in the timeline down here when I can drag and move it. Now, we talked about extrudes in previous videos, so just to quickly pop back to that, I can go to extrude, I can hit this button, and then this is going to move that through space here, and then we have all of the options that we can change on this menu over here. But that's not what I want to do here, so I'm going to hit cancel. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the revolve tool up here. Remember that you can find all of these tools by clicking the drop down menu, and what will happen as you're using Fusion is the tools that you use most frequently will populate up here at the top. So I'm going to go here to revolve, and then you'll see this menu comes up. Now with the extrude it was easy because all you had to do was select the profile, but with revolve you have a couple different options, mainly the axis here. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about setting references and things like that, but for right now, I'm just going to hit my axis here, and then you'll see select. Now, by default, when you start with the revolve, it's going to ask for me a degrees. So 360 is a full rotation, but since I only want a half circle here, I'm going to switch this to 180. So when I switch that to 180, I'm then going to go ahead and have a half circle here, or semi-sphere, excuse me, I keep on calling it a circle, and then I can set these numbers in here directly. So then I'll hit that, and then there I have my semi-spherical face. Now, since this is a flat face, I'm going to go ahead and select on that, and I'm going to create a sketch, another sketch as well. And then I'm pretty much just going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a 3-point arc. Actually, this time I'll do a center point arc because you have different tools. You saw with the last arc that I created, I just drew it in space. But what I can do with the center point arc is I can go ahead and place the center point lock to the origin here, and then I can draw my arc from there. Okay, hit escape to get out of my arc tool, and you'll see as I drag this up and down, and then I can pretty much do the same thing. Now, one of the things which I'd love to talk about, which I not that I love, I will talk about, is how differing constraints can work around and things like that. But on this one, I don't have particularly any sort of constraint set between the center and this line here. But because this arc is defined as having that center point, I don't need to do it. So the rules can kind of add together. But oh, I actually no, I lied. I still need to put it there because it'll shift out there. So I told on myself. Okay, so I'm going to hit the line here, select to that point, and then I will say coincident. There we go. And then I'm going to put a vertical constraint here. Okay, and then I'll have that one, and then I'll follow my tools again to where I'll go to a drop down sketch dimension. I'll select this, and then again, if I go back to my image, bring that down real quick, we'll see that, oop, wrong one. Okay, if I go back to, there we go. All right. If I go back to this one, you'll see that my center here is going to be 20. So I'm going to again follow my radius and make that 10. Okay, so we'll go back here, click this, and I'll make this 10 millimeters. Cool. All right. Now, one of the things is that we've seen how we basically create a solid object by moving a profile through space. We can also do that with revolves as well. We can take away material by moving a solid object through space. So I'll go here with revolve. I'll set for this, and then I'll pick my axis just like I did before. Oops. Yep. There we go. You always want to keep good track of what you're selecting. Go ahead and hit the axis here. Boom, there we go. Now, when you'll see this, you'll see right now that it's giving me a solid addition to it. And when you go down here to operation, you'll see where it says operation join. And then there's a couple different options here. We have join, we have cut, we have intersect, and new body. So when you're kind of combining these physical spaces, you can use them to get the surface, the object, excuse me, that you want. But I'm just going to go ahead and switch this to cut here, right? All right. And then since I want this to be a cut, I'm just going to make it full because it's just going to cut all of this. I could make it 180, but for design intent purposes, I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'll hit OK. And then boom, there goes our object. Now, of course, you've seen me do this a couple times, so I want to do it a different way just to kind of talk about design intent a little bit. So in this one, we have how we have sketch, feature, sketch, feature. So what I'd like to do now is draw it a different way just to demonstrate the organization of it. And again, this isn't so much about right or wrong, but it's about whatever way best serves what you're trying to create. So I'm going to create a new window here. I'm just going to do create a new part design. There we go. All right. And then what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to draw a more complicated sketch. So I'm going to create a sketch. I'll pick the XZ plane again, once again. I'll select this. And a lot of times when it comes down to the arcs, the types that you use really comes down to preference. A lot of times I like to just draw my arcs in space and then apply the constraints to them after, just because of thinking how I do with relationships. But again, as I've said before, what the point really is that you get your part drawn the way that you want to. So I'm going to again take advantage of the auto constraints when I put all this stuff together. And then I have this profile that I can kind of freely draw. And then I'm going to add some constraints to kind of help out with this a little bit. So now one of the other things is kind of like I was getting at before when I made my mistake is that you can apply the same constraint, excuse me, you can apply the same relationship using different constraints, right? So I can grab these two circular edges here and I can go to my constraints and I can make them concentric. Like I can give them the same center point, and then you'll see how I have this constraint here, and then they're locked to each other where they're same size. So I'm going to Control Z, undo to back this up a little bit. Another thing that I can do is I can select these 2 points, and then I can make them coincident, and then that will keep the same relationship. Now, this is one of those things. Oh, and I'm still in my coincident tool, so I need to press escape to, you'll see how my cursor is black. I'll hit escape, and then I'll drag out. And then, so really, I've gotten to the same place 2 different ways. And a lot of time this comes down to preference, but there are instances where it is helpful to be deliberate about it. I think there's nothing too crazy with how you get there, but I think the important thing to think about when you're 3D modeling is how about all these constraints and rules interact with each other. So then to finish this off, I'm going to select this line and I'm going to add a vertical. I'm going to add a vertical constraint here. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is, again, multiple ways which I could do this. I could use guidelines, I could use reference geometry, but I'm just going to go ahead and click this line and click this here. And then I'm going to make these coincident. Now you'll see when I made it coincident, you'll see how it kind of angles to it to keep it in line with that. So it's again how these can kind of go and add to each other. Now since this one is vertical, I'll go ahead and I'll go back to my coincident constraint. This time I'm selecting the constraint first, point and then that locks into that place. So then I can again select these two, control select them, and then oh no, actually I don't want to do that. I want to make this one vertical. So make that one vertical, boom, now we're in business. So then I'll go here, select, then go back to my origin, set a coincident constraint, and boom, we're in business. And then I'm going to put a couple sketch dimensions in here. Then I'll go here. This out one's going to be 25, even though it's marked for the diameter. I want to show it as a radius when I'm dimensioning on my sketch here. I'm going to go here and I'll make this 10. And I'll escape. Now, also another thing that's pretty cool is that when you're working with these dimensions, you can actually go here and toggle diameter, and then it'll kind of show how it and it'll show the full diameter dimension. So it's just again can help you kind of see how you want to lay this stuff out. I'll go out, I'll finish the sketch, and now that I have this particular profile, I'll go back to my revolve. I will select this profile, and then I'll select my axis, and I can just select either one of these lines. I'll do this, and then I want it to be partial, and then I'll make it 180, and then boom. Okay, so again, just another demonstration of how you can get to the same place in a couple of different ways. This is one sketch, one feature. Our previous example is sketch, feature, sketch, feature. So again, just trying to highlight this idea of design intent and how that comes in with the models you create. All right, until the next one.